All right, and we are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back on this Thursday afternoon to our family ministry edition of Table Talk, where we have been reading through a number of great family oriented books. The most recent of which that we're going through right now is this wonderful book right here, the Jesus Storybook Bible, a book which aims to teach really everybody, but especially children, all about the fact that the Bible isn't simply a group of various disconnected stories with different heroes, but actually one story about one particular hero, and that is, of course, Jesus. We had some technical issues last week. It looks like things are running a lot smoother today, which is something I'm very thankful for. If you are joining us here live this afternoon, welcome. I'm glad you're here. If you aren't able to catch this live, as always, this will be available after the fact. It is being recorded, so you can catch part of it or all of it anytime you want in the future. As well, just a repeat announcement from the last few weeks is I do have a number of copies of this book available to any parents who would like to have a copy in your home library to read to your children. It's an excellent book, one that we as a staff can all highly recommend. So if you'll remember from last week, we read about how God saved his people Israel from the Egyptians by parting the seas and allowing them to walk through. He redeemed them and he protected them, which is exactly what Jesus did and pointed towards Jesus. We learned about the warrior leader Joshua, who took down Jericho just like the better leader to come, who is Jesus. And we learned a little bit about King David, who was a good king, even after Israel had a bad king, Saul, and how David points forward to Jesus, who is the better and true king. And we're going to start off today by reading a little bit more about King David, a story many people know, a story that many people love. And so let's go ahead and get centered in on this book. And we are going to get moving. So this is called The Young Hero and the Horrible Giant. David and Goliath from 1 Samuel 17. God's people had some scary enemies, but now the Philistines had come to fight them. The Philistines had a secret weapon called Goliath. Goliath was a terrifying soldier, and worst of all, a giant so strong and so tall and so scary that no one had ever been able to fight him and live to tell the tale. So there they were, the Philistines standing on the top of one hill, God's people standing on top of the other. And every day Goliath came out and shouted, "Send your best soldier to fight me. If he wins, we will be your slaves. But if I win, you will be our slaves." No one spoke, and no one moved. "Chickens!" Goliath bellowed. "Your God can't save you. I'll rip your heads off and have you on toast." His beady, greedy eyes glowered at them hungrily from under his horrible helmet, as if any minute he really might just gobble them all up. And he laughed his terrible laugh. Ha 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 ha! It boomed, echoing horribly around and around the dry, dry valley. Well, Goliath might just as well have been a green, slimy monster with 3 heads, because God's people froze with fear. Their eyes glazed over and they turned deathly pale. They knew if someone didn't do something quick, if someone didn't save them, but God would do something. He would send someone to save them. Now you remember that David was the youngest son of Jesse. Well, his brothers were soldiers in the army. One day, when David brought his brothers their lunches, he saw Goliath. He saw how scared everyone was. "Don't be afraid," David said. "I'll fight him for you." "You're only a little shepherd boy," the king said, "and Goliath is a great soldier. How will you fight him?" "God will help me," David said. So the king gave David his royal armor to wear, but it was too heavy and too big. David couldn't even walk. "I won't need this," David said. Instead, David picked out 5 smooth stones from the stream. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Took his slingshot and walked towards Goliath. Step, step, step. Another nice big picture here that fills up the whole screen. Let's see if I can get it all on there. We go. Goliath walked toward David. Thud, thud, thud. "You?" Goliath peered down at the small boy. "I'm little," David shouted up to him, "but God is great." Goliath laughed, an even terribler laugh than usual. With just one swing of his giant sword, Goliath could finish the boy off. But David kept going. "It isn't how strong you are or how many swords and spears you have that will save you. It is God who saves you. This is God's battle, and God always wins his battles." David put a stone in his sling, swung it around, and let it go. The little stone flew, whizzed like a bullet through the air, and struck Goliath, thud, right between the eyes. Goliath stopped laughing. He stumbled, staggered, and crash fell dead. When the Philistines saw that Goliath was dead, they ran away. And when God's people saw them running away, they cheered. God had saved his people, and David was a hero. Many years later, God would send his people another young hero to fight for them and to save them. But this hero would fight the greatest battle the world had ever known. Brings us to our second chapter for the day. This chapter is called The Good Shepherd. David the Shepherd King. David was a shepherd, but when God looked at him, he saw a king. Sure enough, when David grew up, that's what he became. And David was a great king. He had a heart like God's heart, full of love. Now, that didn't mean he was perfect, because he did some terrible things. He even murdered a man. No, David made a big mess of his life, but God can take even the biggest mess and make it work in his plan. "I need a new heart, Lord," David prayed, "because mine is full of sin. Make me clean inside." God heard David's prayer. He forgave David, and he made David a promise. "I will make you great, David, and one day a king will be born into your family, and he will heal the whole world." Did you know that David was a songwriter too? In fact, his songs were so good, they might have been in the top 40 charts if they had been invented back then. David's songs are like prayers. They are called psalms, and this one is called the Song of the Shepherd. It's probably number 1 on the psalm charts, and it goes like this. God is my shepherd, and I am his little lamb. He feeds me, he guides me, he looks after me, and I have everything that I need. Inside, my heart is very quiet was laying still in the soft green grass in a meadow by a little stream. Even when I walk through the dark, scary, lonely places, I won't be afraid, because my shepherd knows where I am. He is here with me. He keeps me safe. He rescues me. And he makes me strong and brave. He is getting wonderful things ready for me, especially for me. Everything I ever dreamed of. He fills my heart so full of happiness, I can't hold it all inside. Wherever I go, I know God's never stopping, never giving up. Unbreaking, always and forever love will go too. God gave David that song to sing to his people so they could know he loved them and would always look after them, like a shepherd loves his sheep. And one day God was going to do something that would inspire thousands upon thousands of new songs. God was going to show his people once and for all just how much he loved them. Another shepherd was coming, a greater shepherd. He would be called the Good Shepherd. And this shepherd was going to lead all of God's lambs back to the place where they had always belonged, close to God's heart. Our next chapter is called A Little Servant Girl and the Proud General. Naaman was a very important man in a very important army of a very important country. So you see, he was very, very, very important. But Naaman was sick. He had leprosy, which is a nasty thing that stops you from feeling anything. Bits of you fall off without you noticing, like bashed fingers and squished toes. It might sound funny, but it wasn't, and Naaman certainly wasn't laughing. There was no cure. It never went away, and in the end, it killed you. Naaman needed help. Now, there was a little slave girl who worked for Naaman, and she knew someone who could help him. There was a problem. Naaman was her enemy. Not long before, Naaman had led an army raid on her home in Israel. He'd killed her whole family, carried her off to Syria, and made her into his slave. Every night, she cried herself to sleep. She had lost everything. Why would she, of all people, want to help Naaman? Didn't she hate him and want to hurt him back? Didn't she want to make him pay for the wrong he'd done? That's what you would expect. But instead of hating him, she loved him. Instead of hurting him back, she forgave him. I want Naaman to get well, she said to her mistress. There's a man in Israel called Elisha who can heal him. I'll go, said Naaman, loading up his wagons and putting on his flashing armor. But I'll go to the palace because that's where someone important like me gets healed. So he hurried off to Israel and went straight to the king. My healing, please, he announced. I can do lots of things, the king replied, but only God can heal. Just then, a message from Elisha arrived. Said Naaman here, it read. So Naaman hurried off to Elisha's house. But Elisha didn't even come out and greet him. He just sent a servant instead. Doesn't Elisha realize who I am? Naaman thought. But what the servant said next made him even crosser. Wash in there, he said. Just wash? Naaman laughed. In that slimy, stinky river? He looked around to see if this was some kind of joke. But it wasn't. Any person can wash in a river, he thought. I am Naaman. I am important. I should do something important so God will heal me. And he rode off in a rage. Of course, you and I both know that's not how God does things. All Naaman needed was nothing. It was the one thing Naaman didn't have. God knew that Naaman was even sicker on the inside than he was on the outside. Naaman was proud. He thought he didn't need God. His heart didn't work properly. It couldn't feel anything. You see, Naaman had leprosy in his heart. God was not only going to heal Naaman's skin, he was going to heal his pride. Naaman finally agreed to wash in the river, and instantly his skin became smooth like a baby. Naaman wanted to pay Elisha. God healed you. You can't pay, Elisha said. It's free. And so it was that a very sick man was healed, all because of a little servant girl who forgave him. God knew sin was like leprosy. It stopped his children's hearts from working properly, and in the end it would kill them. Years later, God was going to send another servant to forgive as she did, to forgive all of God's children and heal the terrible sickness in their hearts. Their hearts were broken, but God can mend broken hearts. We're going to do one more to end off today. This one is called Operation No More Tears. Do you know what your name means? Well, there was once a man called Isaiah, and his name meant God to the rescue. That might sound like a bit of a funny name to you, but it was just the right name for Isaiah, because God had a special job for Isaiah. You see, Isaiah's job was to listen to God and then tell people what he heard. Now, God let Isaiah know the secret. God was going to mend his broken world. He showed Isaiah his secret rescue plan, Operation No More Tears. This is the message God gave Isaiah. It was like a letter that God wrote to his children. Dear little flock, you're all wandering away from me. Like sheep in an open field, you have always been running away from me. And now you're lost, and you can't find your way back. But I can't stop loving you, and I will come to find you. So I am sending you a shepherd to look after you and love you, carry you home to me. You've been stumbling around like people in a dark room. But in the darkness, a bright light will shine. It will chase away the shadows like sunshine. A little baby will be born, a royal son. His mommy will be a young girl who doesn't have a husband. His name will be Emmanuel, which means God has come to live with us. He is one of King David's children's children, the Prince of Peace. Yes, someone is going to come and rescue you, but he won't be who anyone expects. He will be a king, but he won't live in a palace, and he won't have lots of money. In fact, he will be poor, and he will be a servant. But this king will heal the whole world. He will be a hero. He will fight for his people and rescue them from their enemies. But he won't have big armies, and he won't fight with swords. He will make the blind see. He will make the lame leap like a deer. He will make everything the way it was always meant to be. People will hate him, and they won't listen to him. He will be like a lamb. He will suffer and die. It's the secret rescue plan we made from before the beginning of the world. It's the only way to get you back. But he won't stay dead. I will make him alive again. And one day when he comes back to rule forever, the mountains and the trees will dance and sing for joy. The earth will shout out loud. His fame will fill the whole earth as the waters cover the sea. Everything sad will come untrue. Even death is going to die. He will wipe away every tear from every eye. Yes, the rescuer will come. Look for him, watch for him, wait for him. He will come, I promise. Poor Isaiah. He read God's letter over and over to God's people, but no one listened to him at all, ever. They didn't want to hear God's promise, and they didn't believe it. Did it sound maybe too good to be true? A story that ends happily ever after? Well, it does sound like a fairy tale, doesn't it? And as anyone will quickly tell you, fairy tales aren't true. Or are they? And that is where we are going to end for this week. Thanks again for tuning in this beautiful Thursday afternoon for Table Talk. Tune in again tomorrow on Friday, same time, 3:30 p.m. for our roundtable discussion. And as always, tune in on Sunday mornings for our 10:30 a.m. Sunday service. We'll be live streaming this week, just the same as we've been. We hope to see many of you there. Until then, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay safe and stay healthy. Bye now.